Recording. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Serge.
I don't know why you still start with that line, but my name's James.
Because
why are you putting it up?
because on my Zoom, we're top and bottom. Are we side by side on yours?
You need to sort it right, because you keep posting.
Now we're side by side.
You keep posting on YouTube with me on the left. Now, really, it should be you on the left.
That's true, but I don't know how to change that, and nor can I be bothered.
All right.
Oh dear. So we're still trying to keep the content flowing for everybody at home. Not as many people listening to us, James.
Well, that's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we're here for the hardcore.
We are. And today is People's Poll Day, which is from Monday. We had to juggle around the rotor a little bit this week. I think next week we'll hopefully be back to a little bit more normality. But it's been okay. You want to run down everybody's the options, on the People's Poll from Monday. What did everybody vote for? And then we'll get into the answer.
Well done. As per usual, there were 4 options with no Tottenham at the moment. I included the idea of Spurs' financial results, which I thought would be particularly interesting to cover, bearing in mind it did cover off the period of Spurs being at Wembley, then new stadium, and obviously Champions League finals, see how it compared to previous years. I also added an option for Premier League clubs and communities, because everything is bad news stories at the moment, and actually there's a lot of good news stories going on. That might be interesting to cover. The one that came second, and this will go back in the vote on Sunday for next week, was the idea of a best ever Brits abroad 11. So English, Scottish, Welsh or Northern Irish players that have played abroad. Serge, what are you doing, mate? You're making so much noise in my ears.
Oh, really? Sorry, it could be the microphone here.
So that's going to go back in the poll. And I can say now the People's Poll vote on Sunday will be a best 11s. It will be a choice of that, and that one will go back in. The winner of the poll vote was the crisis in the National League at the moment.
Yes.
Which I did a lot of, when we did the Thursday throwback yesterday on Leeds 1991-92, I did a lot of talking, mate. I'm going to lean on you for this one, I think.
We're in a difficult situation here. Like, I suppose the thing that a lot of people don't understand and need to think about is the size of non-league clubs, because we're used to Premier League clubs in terms of the wage bill, the turnover, the attendance, etc. A lot of these non-league clubs are basically small businesses. They're not turning over hundreds of millions. Like, I think Arsenal's revenue might be 500 million. It might be 500,000 for some of these clubs, maybe up to $1 million, $1.5 million. Small businesses in much the same way that we have a small business here, right? And we operate in that way. People aren't getting rich there. The kind of staff that they have in the offices and the admin teams that they have we're talking tens of people, not hundreds of people. It was interesting when Tony Clemfos at Barnet, and I know that's something that we want to talk about, put everybody on notice. There were 60 people. There's people in just the accounts department at Spurs or something like that, right? They're just the size of the organizations. Behind the scenes, there must be 1,000 staff at Spurs, hundreds of staff at Spurs. You're talking about catering, you're talking about accounts, you're talking about marketing team, you're talking about the sales team, corporate hospitality. Whereas a club like Barnet, 60 people, we really need to think about the size of these clubs as everyday people who are just living everyday lives, which is why they're so much more affected by what's happened with coronavirus. And it has been very, very difficult for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you take an example, say Spurs now with a new stadium, if you factor in stewards, police and the like, you're comfortably talking nearly a couple of thousand on a match day, I'd say.
Wow, that goes to show the number of people, right? And Barnet might have an attendance of a few hundred.
Well, yeah, the Spurs might be paying more staff on a day than, say, a club like Barnet will get in actual attendance.
Yeah. And, so many have reached out and said that they're having difficulties. They're looking for more guidance from the government and what have you. I'm a little sympathetic with the government at the moment. I know a lot of people might like the response or don't like the response. They are doing a lot as quickly as they can. but managing something of this scale is very, very difficult. We had the announcement yesterday from the FA about certain divisions, like lower than the North and South National Leagues or what have you, for the season now, right? Which is not great news.
Yeah, so just to clarify this, because it wasn't very well clarified when the statement was kind of published, and a lot of these clubs have said that they only found out themselves via social media channels in the news, which is pretty disgraceful, really. But then I guess we underestimate the size of just how many amateur football clubs there are who we will have
Loads.
never heard of, but are important. And I'll tell you about a couple. So South Shields are a side who have already responded to the threat of the season being expunged. Is that the correct word, Suj?
Voided, expunged.
Expunged, yeah. So South Shields are 12 points clear of their league, and they've already said they're going to sue the FA if this stands and football for the season doesn't resume, because there will be no promotion relegation. And further down lower into tiers, there's a team that I'd never heard of before called Jersey Bulls, which I presume is based in Jersey. They have won all 27 league games this season. They have already gained automatic promotion, confirmed, and have been told they will not go up.
Mm-hmm. Difficult, but I understand. That's why I understand that decision. It has to be one rule for all. You can't have different rules going on in different leagues, unfortunately.
But this is the major issue, and obviously it relates to higher divisions as well. Like if South Shields are saying, right, we're going to sue the FA, do you know what? Financially, it's probably something the FA can deal with. What if Liverpool want to sue them, or Leeds United, for example, for not getting promotion to the Premier League is perhaps a more likely.
That's suddenly where, South Shields or Jersey Bulls are suing for tens of thousands of pounds at best, right? Leeds specifically will be suing for 150 million. Is that what it's worth to get into the Premier League? And that's where the numbers get particularly scary for people.
There's no effects at these levels as well. So one of the things they didn't clarify well was basically they labelled everything from tier 3 down. Now, to me, the National League is tier 5.
Yeah.
And then basically got tier 6A and B, I'd call it, which is the National League
North and South,
and the National League South. But obviously, in terms of the non-league structure, the National League is tier 1, and then the North and South divisions are tier 2. So everything below that has been expunged and annulled like it never existed.
Mm. The difficulty here, if you look at it from a business point of view, is the financial planning around it, right? That they want to know they want to know what's going to happen in the near future so they can make plans around it. It's why Tony Clenthos at Barnet put everybody on notice. We can talk about that as a specific case in a second. But every day when I'm coming into work, and I'm in an isolated office on my own before anyone's worried that I'm contaminated. But there's 3 questions.
Boris.
We'll talk about Boris as well if we get the time. The first question is, have we hit the bottom? Are we at the worst possible case? From an economic point of view, we're definitely not at the bottom from a cases point of view, but everybody's already on lockdown. So the shops and the economy doesn't really have anywhere lower to potentially go, does it? Or does it? So,
well, yeah, of course it does. From a football perspective, this is nowhere near the lowest because all these clubs currently still exist.
They do.
It can get a lot worse.
But I suppose is there anything else that can be switched off or shut down or locked down? There isn't much more because everything is already on shutdown. So from a business point of view, we don't know who've hit the bottom. I mean, people know we work in packaging for retail. Retail is on shutdown. So next week could, in theory, be worse than this week. We don't know. But where's the bottom? The second question is, how long is this going to go on for? No one. And then the third question is, once it's over, how quickly are we going to recover? So for me to make any plans right now, I need to know, are we at the bottom or have I still got a plan to go lower than where we are? How long do I have to plan for? And then on the other side, how quickly does the recovery happen? No one knows answers to any of these questions, which is why I'm really sympathetic, but understand why it's so difficult for the FA and the government to give anybody any advice financially, because they don't know the answers to these questions either. And so for these clubs, it's like, when are we going to open our gates again? when are we going to be playing matches again? Nobody knows. And what I've resigned myself to in the last 2 or 3 days, and maybe a lot of these clubs are going to have to, is that whilst we don't know, stop trying to guess. So I mean, every day I'll come in and I'll be like, okay, we've got maybe 2 more weeks of bad times. Maybe the football will start again on the 1st of May. Maybe this, maybe that. Maybe ifs and buts and might be maybes are not helping anyone. So I've just kind of put it out of my mind. In the meantime, the government are paying salaries for a lot of people. I think the playing staff at these clubs will earn $2,500 a month, or maybe even less in some cases if they're semi-pro, that kind of thing.
Much less.
Financially, I think all of the staff and the people will be looked after in this situation. I don't think there's going to be too many issues for the next 12 weeks because that's what the government have announced, right? The job retention scheme is for 12 weeks. What happens after that is interesting. The one thing I don't have clarity on, and I would like to see some clarity on, and this is where the government can help, is, the industries that have been hit hardest is kind of leisure and tourism, right? Gyms, restaurants, cafes, travel companies. Football is a leisure activity, right? It's no different to if cinemas and theatres have to close, football clubs fall into that same category. So long as they're classified as leisure and tourism or in that bracket, then I think these clubs should be getting help and support from the government.
Why do you think then, to take an individual case, your boyhood team, Barnet, why did your man Tony in charge, why did he jump the gun so quick when the National League obviously played on for a further weekend beyond the Premier League and EFL and suffered a huge amount of criticism for that, which is understandable. I think about half the games went ahead. There was desperation from these clubs to get money through the door when they knew it was coming, basically. But as soon as it got announced that the season was going to be cancelled for the foreseeable, your man at Barnet basically said, right, everybody's in line to lose their job here. Why did he jump the gun so quick?
Well, it was procedure. So the rules around letting people go in employment, if anybody's been employed by a company for less than 2 years, then that organisation doesn't have to give that employee any reason as to why they're letting them go. They simply let them go and you pay them their notice, whether it's a month or whatever. You work the notice or you don't work the notice, wash your hands, that's it, job done. If any employee has been with you for longer than 2 years, you have to go through a redundancy process. And the redundancy process is like a 3 or 4 step process. I'm sure there's people listening that are in HR that will know in even more detail. But in essence, there is a 3 or 4 step process. It's like a consultation period. So first, I have to tell you that your job is at risk. Then I have to have a meeting with you to tell you that your job is going to be deleted and that you can apply for a different job within the organization or whatever. You have the right to then go away and think about it for a few days. Then you can come back and say, I don't want to apply for any alternative jobs. I'll take the redundancy. And then a few days after that, or a day after that, you can be made redundant. And then you've got your notice period of a month. And if you've been at the organization even longer, you get like 1 week's pay for every year you've been there if it's over 3 years. So if he decided that actually, do you know what, in 3 or 4 weeks, there's a risk here that I'm going to have to make people redundant, I may as well get the ball rolling on the process today, because issuing a notice to the entire workforce to say your job is at risk is just, that's it. It's just issuing a notice to say your job is at risk. It's nothing more than that. So all he's done really, and it's good practice, is bought himself, like if the proverbial was to hit the fan, then another 2 weeks salaries on 60 people, you're talking about the best part of 40, 50 grand maybe, right? Take it as if an average person earns £1,500 a week, a month, sorry, that's 750 quid over 60 people, that's 40 grand just for 2 weeks time period. So what he was doing was getting the ball rolling on the process straight away, just in case he had to execute the full process. And of course, I'm not mates with Tony Clenthos, even though we probably both still live in Barnet. I don't know the guy, but this is from my point of view why I think he did that. It was a case of, do you know what? There's a good chance that this may go south. Let me get the ball rolling straight away. And he has since announced that that the jobs, there's only half a dozen people, I think, that will be let go now at Barnet. They had certain difficulty at Barnet around the academy status of the club, because there is an academy there, and I think that the academy team were getting relegated or what have you, so they were about to lose their academy status, which meant £500,000 in funding wasn't going to come into the club for next season. So he already knew as well that, as well as this coronavirus crisis, it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Coronavirus crisis, that there was this academy issue looming in the future as well. So it was a double kind of whammy that was going to hit Barnet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what was scary from his original statement was Barnet are 11th at the moment, 4 points off a playoff place, which goes down to 7th in the National League. He'd essentially said in that first statement that he was holding hope on the off chance that Barnet could get promoted was essentially going to be what saved the club. And obviously now, I think you'll explain it better than myself, but with the government initiative to obviously pay a lot of these staff, that's why you can now hold on to people. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The government will pay 80% of their salaries for 12 weeks. All it's doing really, and the government has said it's 3 months, 12 weeks, but may be extended further if needed, because they don't know either, right? We don't know when the end is. We don't know how long this is going to go on for, which is why it's a very, very fluid process at the moment. And it's why I come back to, you can criticize the government if you want. It's costing them a hell of a lot of money covering people's salaries and things. And so they're trying. On one side, you've got an economic issue. On the other side, you've got a healthcare issue, and balancing the two so that the healthcare issue doesn't cause a massive economic problem is difficult. Now, football clubs have more, they're more than just businesses. They're part of the local community. So if you look at the article that was on Barnet's website, or press release type thing from the chairman a couple of days ago, club do things like kids clubs. They have meals in the community. They help with the healthcare, like the medical team are helping with the coronavirus outbreak now. A lot of this stuff has to be put on hold as well. And the impact that the clubs have in the community at that small level is really important. You look at you guys at Mark Trott at Stockport County, the owner of Stockport County, who's able to help with the NHS.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, very, very good. Very, very generous of him.
So Stockport County, or he, is it just because he's loaded, or is the club all right?
Nah, I think it's because he's loaded. So he put...
Okay, well, he himself then, as owner of Stockport County, and Stockport County will be one of the biggest clubs at this level. Older listeners might remember them beating you in a League Cup quarter-final in 1997 when they were a Division 1 club, which would now be the Championship, lost to Middlesbrough in the semis. They're one of the bigger clubs. He's donated £75,000 to the NHS in Stockport. So that football club must be absolutely fine.
You'd think that he's
got to be
to keep the club going for sure.
Well, I don't suppose he's offered £75,000 out of his back pocket when he's going to let the football club die. It must be all right. Of course,
exactly. Yeah. In times like this, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and that's not completely true. But I mean, if you've got a few $100,000 in the bank right now, you're going to get through the next 3 months with no problems, right? It's unfortunately the hand to mouth that are not going to survive this situation. I think that the voiding of the season for some clubs has an added complication now around players being out of contract and what have you, that we've seen at other non-league clubs now, where a lot of players will only have 1 or 2 season contracts. They don't sign 3 or 5 year deals. A lot of clubs are now worried that even if the season was to reopen, they're going to lose half their staff, playing staff that is specifically, and don't know how they're going to finish the season. I don't understand, if I'm honest with you, why, if the Premier League and the Football League is able to restart and continue, the lower down pyramid can't do exactly the same.
Well, one of the issues might be, as highlighted, and is one of the seems like someone who's come forward this week and is well worth looking into his comments, which are regularly being updated. It's Danny Hunter, who's the chairman of Boreham Wood, which is where Arsenal play their reserve games. I think the ladies team play as well.
So that's around the corner from us again.
It is, yeah. We'll come back to that because, in fact, let's do it now because in that case, would Arsenal still be playing Boreham Wood, do you think, for the
Uh,
rent on the reserves and the ladies team and stuff like that?
yeah, they should still be paying rent.
But if they're not using the facility,
Well, it depends what kind of lease they've signed. So if they've signed a 12-year lease, a 10-year lease or whatever, then they've got to pay their rent monthly. They can certainly go to Boreham Wood and say, look, we need a 3-month holiday on our rent or what have you. But I can't see that manifesting itself going down well, where a big boy like Arsenal can't afford to pay Boreham Wood. What are they going to be paying in rent? A couple of grand a month, 4 or 5 grand?
no, I get that. I spoke about this a little bit on my stream on Tuesday and said that probably Arsenal would do the right thing, but
Yeah.
they're also using, as you say, Spurs are using Stevenage Borough at the moment, who are bottom of League Two and very likely to join the National League if the season continues. So Spurs will have their reserves, their under 23s play at Stevenage. Well, actually, the women play at Barnet at the Hive.
Mm.
And I said that I couldn't guarantee that Spurs would offer the money as quickly as Arsenal would,
Arsenal would.
because of how Daniel Levy would operate to try and keep the
Mm.
money in the bank as long as possible. But the Bournemouth chairman, Danny Hunter, his name is, he said some very interesting things this week. So in terms of what you're saying there about the season continuing, one of the things he explained is basically a lot of non-league contracts end on April 25th. So the date we've commonly been using is June the 30th for, say, Premier League players and most
Yep.
Championship players, etc. But most non-league contracts run out on April the 25th, and they'll have it written in that, say, were they to get into the playoffs or something, it's extended by a couple of weeks. But that's the end of the National League season, basically. He said that basically their season, and they're fifth in the National League at the moment, their season is over, whether they restart or not. And one of the reasons for that being is essentially on April 25th, he's got 6 players left.
Mm.
So what happens?
Well, they'll have to sign extensions with these players or what have you. The interesting thing for these players, I mean, decent clubs are always looking for good players, but you'd not expect many other clubs to sign these players up straight away, right? Not when they don't know when the season's going to start. Why would you sign a new player and you don't and pay his wages when you don't know when you're going to get any use out of that player? So for me, I think a lot of these contracts, in the same way that they will after the 30th, like we talked about Ryan Fraser on a previous show at Bournemouth and stuff like that, I think they'll just get turned into rolling contracts until and when the season gets played out. That would be the common sense thing to do. They're not going to go and play
Do you
else
think so, though?
for the lower league.
We're not talking about Bournemouth going, yeah, Fraser, there's your 30 grand a week or whatever he's on.
No, but we're talking about a situation. Yeah, if a club didn't need the players, they'd let them go. But we're talking about a situation like Boreham Wood where they can't get a team out, right? You and me are going to get a game for them if we're lucky. So in that situation where the club needs the players, no doubt, I think they will keep it rolling and do that. If the club can afford to get rid of the player and survive, then yeah, I think they probably will. What I'm seeing right now in the economy and the market from a business point of view, this is not like your average consumers going into Tesco or Asda, is nobody's paying anybody. So we sit in a food chain, we have suppliers, we have customers, and suppliers have suppliers and what have you. Basically, no one's paying anybody. Everybody's just sitting tight and holding on to their cash, like hitting pause. In a few weeks, it'll all unravel itself. Like a lot of our suppliers here have shut up shop. So I can't pay. They're not chasing me for money, and I can't pay them. Well, I can pay them, but they're not chasing me for money. And then on the flip side, customers are not paying us. And I think everyone's adopted that approach of, do you know what? Nobody do anything, and let's just sit tight. And I think that's what will happen with the football league now in the next few weeks as well.
So in that case, then, why would a club like Barrow, who are top of the National League at the moment and on the verge of, if it finishes, will probably win that league and get into League Two. They've estimated that they'll be losing towards £100,000 to £150,000 in the short term, and then they're wiped, mate. So how would they still be losing that sort of money if everything, as you say, was on pause?
So the bills are still racking up. Like I still have to pay my rent here. We still have to pay a certain amount of payroll. The lights are still on. There's certain costs that don't disappear, property being a major part of it. All I'm saying is that they still owe that money. They're just not physically paying that money. So they're racking themselves up losses and debt. That's how they'll end up in that situation with nothing coming in. It's going to be a very difficult one for them. And what will eventually happen is that they'll borrow the money from the bank, clear down their debt, and pay it back over 2 years. For a lot of companies, it's going to take a year to 18 months to get out of this back to any kind of reality.
So probably to give it a larger scale analysis, but relate this to non-league terms. Obviously, Spurs own the stadium that they've built. They own that land, everything. They purchased it all years ago.
Whereas, yeah, but they'll have borrowed money to buy it. They wouldn't have had.
Yeah, no. I get that.
Unless Joe Lewis is pretty rich, but
they're not paying for that site right now. No, it's theirs. If they shut all the lights off and close the gates, nothing's happening in that building. Would that be fair?
Yeah, but they still got to pay the mortgage.
Okay, yeah. West Ham are obviously paying rent at the moment, yeah?
Yeah, we still have to pay rent.
So would it make any difference to any of these clubs if they own the land, own the stadium, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, their costs would be lower anyway on a month-by-month basis. They wouldn't be racking up a mortgage or rent. You'd be very surprised if there's anybody who owns their stadium and has paid up cash for it, because it's a lot of money we're talking about here. But those kind of bills are still ongoing. People are just kicking them forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
What they've done as a majority at the moment, the National League clubs, is they've clubbed together to fill in a questionnaire which they're all giving individually to the FA. I say individually, but kind of like a group fund of what each of them anticipates to lose over the next certain period of time, be it 2 weeks, month, 3 months, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the hope is obviously the FA will then find a way of finding some funds. I don't know if now is the case that the government will get involved in that sort of thing as well. I mean, where's the line of government involvement? So say if you're, I don't know, Barnsley in the Championship, or Charlton might be a better reference because they're really struggling financially at the moment. Where does the government line stop in terms of who gets help and who doesn't? Because Charlton will have players who are on, say, 10 grand a week, maybe.
Yep.
Whereas in the non-league, it might be 10 grand a week for the whole playing staff, for example.
It varies depending on the type of help that you are potentially talking about. So the government introduced like five or six different schemes all at the same time. So the first one is this coronavirus job interruption scheme. I've actually got the website open in front of me now. Now that's any UK business is eligible for that. It doesn't matter whether you're £100 million company or a £20 million company. So all the football clubs will be able to apply for that. And that pays someone's salary up to $2.5 grand for 3 months. It's not going to help with the players, well, help a little bit, but that's really designed around the non-playing staff within clubs. So that all clubs will be eligible for that. The government have kicked forward a VAT. I think a lot of football clubs will have VAT bills. So your VAT bill, whichever would be due in April, May, or June, you don't have to pay it now until 2021. So if they had like a couple $100 grand VAT bill, then that can get kicked forward. If you'll remember, more often than not, like when Bury went bust and a lot of these clubs go bust, the debt that they let rack up really quickly is the HMRC, whether it's PAYE or VAT tax, because HMRC are quite slow at chasing that kind of money, and it's quarterly, and they don't have the manpower and resource. That's the debt that people quite often let rack up. But that's applicable for every business as well. So that will get kicked forward as well. There's some rates relief related stuff, which businesses can get a grant from between 10 and 25,000. I don't think many clubs will be eligible for that. Basically, if your building that you operate from is of a certain size, and to give you an idea, 51,000 might be an office that can hold 50 people, you would get a grant out of the government. I don't think many clubs are going to be getting that, and especially if you've got a stadium, that's going to have a much bigger value. And then it's down to loans from the banks. And the government are saying that they're going to provide security against loans and stuff, but anybody eligible to apply for one of these loans up to £5 million, they're easier that they're harder to get than perhaps it looks like on paper. So it's a mixture of really. I think when you have an industry like football, which falls very similar to travel and tourism, it needs to be treated as a kind of separate case. Airlines, for example, have been grounded, right? Absolutely grounded. Airlines will be treated as a separate case to. So in my opinion, football needs to be looked at in that way as well. I think what they're doing about filling in this questionnaire to figure out how much money they're shy of is a very good start. Let's be honest, the FA will have enough money to bail out most of these clubs and should do.
Do you think that's right? I mean, I don't mean it's ethically right. I mean, I think we all agree that it's ethically right that the clubs get the help, but do you think that they will?
Yeah. I really do. I think football is the fabric of this country. I really think this is now when you realise and you see the impact at the lower league clubs and stuff. That I honestly, genuinely do think they will.
I feel a lot better about it for these clubs than when we had Bradley and Neil on Clash of the Correspondents.
Correct.
I know Neil was really worried about some of these, and he obviously in Bournemouth.
He's a Cambridge guy, right?
A small club. He's based in Cambridge. He goes to the Abbey. It's his local team as well when he's not going to see Bournemouth.
Correct.
And he was really worried about the size of some of these clubs. I feel a bit better about it now. I feel like the support might come. I think the big difference between now and the unfortunate scenario of what happened with Bury is Bury was an isolated case.
Yeah.
Genuinely, if there is no help for all of these clubs, there is no football pyramid anymore.
Correct.
Gone. They'll all go.
Yeah. That's the thing that in the government's response to COVID, I have been reasonably impressed, is that they seem to be listening to the concerns and then bringing out measures to help them. The self-employed stuff came out yesterday, for example, and they are adapting their approach day by day and making more and more available. And not only that, the type of things that they're making available, like you're never going to please 100% of the people. There's always going to be people that are left out for whatever reason. When you roll out measures that cover hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, you're going to miss a few people, right? They are going to continue to keep adapting. So I think it will get better, the support they're offering. The other thing is, if you look at 2008, 2009, when we had that financial crisis, there was no healthcare crisis. It was just a financial crisis. All of the measures that they rolled out predominantly were to help large organizations and the banks, right? They bailed out the banks and stuff. Average Joe didn't really get that much support. This time round, I feel like it's much more trickling down to everybody. I know we're going to have listeners that are going to struggle through this and are not going to get the help they need or might need some support and advice. Like you've already said, I would say DMs are open. I can't promise we're the most knowledgeable, but we are.
Suj can't promise it will get back to you within a 2-week cycle.
Well, now that I've said it, I will. But in terms of pointing people to the right place, I think I've got a good understanding on the business side of the response and the financial side of the response. So I can point people in the right place and happy to do that. So, yeah, I know there's plenty that will be irritated with Boris as well as happy with Boris. It's just very, very hard. You have to put it in the context of what is actually happening out there, And speaking of Boris, maybe we should wrap up by talking about him.
He's got it, hasn't he? It's no surprise. To be honest, I hope he's all right.
I wouldn't, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is like going out in bubble wrap with a full hazmat suit on, and 1 being walking around Starkers, licking people, I'm like a 3 or 4 in how worried I am about coronavirus and the precautions. I'm not wearing a mask when I go to the shops and that. I've still been coming to work, even though I'm isolated at work. So it kind of doesn't, it's more isolated than my house with 2 kids and a wife running around crazy. So I can actually get stuff done here. So I'm quite relaxed in terms of the potential impact of corona. But then you'd think that the Prime Minister, they would be putting every precaution around Top Boy in the country that they could, cleansing, sanitizing from A to B. Like he must have 2 or 3 people around him at all times monitoring. I went to Asda yesterday. They had security guys every 3 or 4 aisles, just all the customers were keeping social distance. and they were letting people in like 2 or 3 at a time. Surely there's people around Boris making sure that no one gets close to my man, and he still managed to get coronavirus. So it just goes to show that I think this is, if it's going to get you, it's going to get you.
I want to clarify for the listeners at this point who are worried about Suj being very erratic at the moment, that Suj can drive to work and there's nobody else in the building there, is there?
No, there's no one else. And I wouldn't get on public transport. And I'm keeping my distance from anyone. I am being pretty sensible. I'm not really going to see my parents and anything like that. But
I'm not really.
Well, I had to go.
I told mine to do one.
I had to go on Wednesday to see my dad because, but so he like we've talked about it before. He's more of a technophobe than you are, but he needed his computer from work because he wanted to just browse the internet and basically kill 8 hours a day doing something. So I had to go and set a computer up for him so that he didn't. So if the coronavirus didn't get him bored and was going to, he'd have to go around and plug in a monitor to a PC for him. But apart from that, it's kind of stay away season.
On the status of family members, thanks for all those who sent well wishes in for Harry.
Yes.
He is much, much better. He's like
good.
Himself.
That's what we needed to know.
He's good. Wife's got it now, I'm sure. I think I already had it and it was just dormant in me, mate. Can I ask, just to finish off on the football?
Yes.
The money that will likely come into these National League clubs, is it lent?
Some yes, some no. So the wages that are going to be paid, that's not a debt. That's just paid straight up. You don't have to pay that back. If they go to the bank to potentially borrow money, then yeah, it would have to be paid back. So there'll be interest and charges that go with it. Mm.
Okay, so it's probably going to be very much on an individual case, therefore, in terms of how bad your stadium site, your rent, your etc. But the government will look after all the staff stuff, essentially. What about in that case, like you were talking earlier about covering up to 2,500, is it?
Of salaries, yeah.
And that's per individual, isn't it?
Yep, for 12 weeks.
Okay, so in the case of, say, Charlton, who've got player X on £10,000 a week, would they even bother going to the government saying, "Can you pay £2,500 of that for the time being?" Or
yeah, I would. Why wouldn't you? It's free money, right? Yeah. The only issue there is potentially how players are paid. So there's a good old PAYE scheme where the government takes your tax and national insurance at the point that you get paid. Some of these guys might have like offshore companies or a limited company set up to manage all of their income. Some of their money will be coming from sponsorships. Some of it will be coming from appearance fees, etc. So if they've got a complicated structure, then they won't be eligible for this. You've got to be on PAYE for this to come into play. And I reckon the higher up you go, the more complex the structures around a lot of these players.
Wouldn't have.
Yes and no.
I wouldn't have thought that in the National League that there are too many players, and I'm sure there are some. I can't think that there'd be too many on sort of over £2,500 a week.
Yeah, I would be surprised.
I'd think that's the top end of what you might find at that level. Maybe a Stockport guy's got a few more. I don't know. But I'd have thought that's the top end for most. However, going into League One, League Two, there will be players knocking about on up to like $5-10 grand a week, mate.
Yeah.
And perhaps more of the issues actually above.
It's true. It could be very, very difficult. You'd hope that these guys have put away enough savings that they can get through this for the next couple of months as well. That those type of people that have a few 100,000, like I said, in the bank will be okay.
Well, I'm not sure. The problem is, I'm not sure they do, Suj. I think it's all one of the
relative
things they're doing. They're estimating in terms of what their losses are, and there's that guaranteed income that every couple of weeks they're getting X amount of money through gate receipts, sales in the ground, food program, etc., etc. Suj is getting up and walking, which is. Really
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because I don't want the battery to die on my laptop, mate.
That would be badass.
Yeah,
your Wi-Fi was better over there anyway.
Yeah, that is very true.
I think the final thing to say is on the football and the restarting at that level. What's happening is what did they call it? 3, 4, and below. sets the precedent that we might lose the National League season. However, I suspect you were right earlier in saying we're all league will be influenced by UEFA, EFL will be by the Premier League, and the National League will be influenced by the EFL. The last to get decided if it resumes, or it's the most likely to fall by the wayside. If it ends up in a period where we say season null and void, National League will be next.
Mm-hmm.
You'll know that before like the Premier League and that, I should imagine.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. They'll definitely be moving in that way.
But it does seem from the clubs from Premier League all the way down to that level, everybody generally wants the football season to finish if it can be done. The problem is at this level, there's going to be variances between, say, your Boreham Woods, your Barnets and your Stockport counties in terms of who's capable of what. And it might mean you're in a position with the National League where only half the clubs can physically fulfil the fixtures. Unless perhaps there's a movement in terms of registration of players. So if player runs out of contract at Boreham Wood on April 25th and we restart on June the 25th, which seems unlikely at the moment, can Stockport County sign ex-player who's been registered for the same season at Boreham Wood? There's a load of things they'll need to sort out.
Yeah, definitely. And the other disparity between the clubs is how rich the owners are. You've got an owner that's a millionaire, you've got an owner that's a multi-millionaire. They're going to be in very different situations as well. So like we said at the start, I guess we come back full circle. We don't know how deep this goes. We don't know how long it's going to last, and we don't know what the recovery is going to be like. And until then, how can we do any planning?
Agreed. As I said, though, I'm more confident that these clubs are going to survive.
Yeah.
It's going to be
I couldn't agree
work.
more. I definitely agree with you on that. So, James, that's another week of content wrapped up, albeit we haven't seen each other all week.
Miss you, mate.
Yeah. We'll be, if you do want to keep an eye on what content we do have coming up, follow James on Twitter at Planet FPL Pod over the weekend. We'll put a schedule out for next week, as well as the topics for the People's Poll, a bit of an insight into what we might be doing for Throwback Thursday and more. If you are a supporter of one of these non-league clubs or involved in one of these clubs in any way, do put some stuff out on Twitter and tag us, because it'd be good to get an insight into to see from on the ground kind of perspective, because I'm sure we've got listeners that are involved with some of these clubs. If you have any more insight, that would be really, really valuable. Other than that, do share the podcast with all your football-loving friends, family, and what have you. We do hope that our conversation gives you a little bit more insight into the non-league and what's going on with coronavirus and the economy. Other than that, leaves me just to say have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Ciao for now.
Did anybody even know it was Friday? Be nice to each other.
Did you believe it?
Cue music, man child.
Bye.